It started with the sound of tires on wet pavement, soft, rhythmic, almost apologetic. A taxi pulling up in front of our house on a Wednesday night that wasn't supposed to feel any different. I was sitting on the couch in our living room, half watching a documentary I'd already seen twice. The lamp beside me flickered gently, casting warm shadows against the beige walls. I remember thinking the neighborhood was unusually quiet for 8 p.m. Then the front door opened. I turned my head, puzzled. Amelia stood there, framed by the rain. She was supposed to be in Denver. The last I'd heard from her was a text that morning, something about her team's final pitch and how excited she was to wrap things up. She wasn't due back until Thursday night. Yet there she was, suitcase in hand, raindrops clinging to her coat and a glow in her eyes like she'd just won the lottery. "Hey, babe," she said, smiling as she stepped inside. Final meeting got canceled last minute. I caught an earlier flight. My first reaction should have been relief, happiness, even excitement. But it wasn't. It was hesitation. The kind that sits in your stomach like a question you're afraid to ask. "You didn't text or call?" I said, standing up. She shrugged as she toed off her shoes. "Wanted to surprise you." And just like that, the unease slid a little deeper into me. I watched her disappear into the hallway, the wheels of her suitcase thumping against the hardwood. The house smelled like rain, now fresh, a little electric. I walked into the kitchen, poured us 2 glasses of wine, and tried to shake off the chill that had started to settle into my bones. 5 minutes passed before I followed her to the bedroom. The door was open. She had her suitcase open on the bed and was kneeling on the floor, collecting items from her spilled makeup bag. Lipsticks, brushes, mini bottles, the usual mess. But then something unfamiliar caught my eye. A dark, elegant bottle of cologne half tucked under a corner of the comforter. It didn't belong to me. I didn't even wear cologne, not since my early 30s when I decided smelling like cedar and musk was a young man's game. But this wasn't cheap Dr. store stuff. It was the kind of bottle that sat behind glass at Nordstrom. The kind with a magnetic cap and foreign lettering etched into thick, black glass. I bent down, picked it up, and turned it slowly in my hand. Amelia glanced up and immediately froze. Just for a second. A blink. But I saw it. "Oh," she said, her voice lifting into casual territory so fast it felt rehearsed. "That's from the client. A gift for the whole team. Sort of a thank you from their CEO or something." I stared at her. "This is a men's cologne." "Yeah," she replied, brushing her hair behind her ear again. "I was going to drop it at the office for Greg tomorrow. He wasn't on the trip, but he's been managing the account back home. I must have thrown it in my bag by accident." That was a lot of detail. Too much, maybe? "I see," I said. My voice came out low, even. Not because I wasn't angry, but because I didn't want to sound like I didn't believe her. Even though I didn't. She smiled again, a gentle, tired one, and stood up, brushing the dust off her jeans. "Anyway, I'm starving. Want to do Thai? Or I could make the chicken stir-fry you like." I nodded. "Sure." We ate dinner in silence, punctuated only by small talk. She told me about the presentation, how the client loved their prototype, how her manager called her a rock star during the debrief. She sounded proud, confident, like she'd come back from war with medals in hand. I listened, asked the right questions, made the right noises. And all the while, that bottle of cologne sat in the back of my mind like a siren, small, potent, impossible to ignore. That night, I watched her sleep. She had a habit of curling toward the center of the bed, her back facing me, her arms tucked under her pillow like a child. I used to find it endearing. Now I couldn't stop wondering if she'd slept that way in a hotel room that wasn't hers. If someone else had watched her do the same. Someone who wore that cologne. I couldn't bring myself to touch her. I just laid there, eyes open in the dark, listening to her breathe. I wish I could say I let it go, that I chalked up the cologne incident to coincidence and got back to my life. But the truth is that small bottle cracked something open inside me. Something I hadn't even realized was holding me together. And once it cracked, it didn't stop. It spread. In the days that followed, I found myself remembering things I hadn't paid much attention to before. Moments that had seemed insignificant at the time now came back with sharp edges. Like the weekend Amelia canceled our trip to see my parents. It was a few weeks back. We were supposed to drive to San Antonio for my dad's birthday, nothing extravagant, just family and barbecue and my mom's too sweet lemon pie. She had been excited about it. Even picked out a gift with me. But the night before, she came home from work looking flustered and said she couldn't go. "Last-minute seminar," she claimed. "Mandatory and I can't get out of it." I remember being disappointed, but I didn't question it. Amelia had always been ambitious. Workaholic even. That was part of what I loved about her. But now that memory sat differently. Now I wondered if she had even been in the city that weekend. Then there was the laptop. We shared a MacBook. Nothing fancy, just something we used for travel planning, bills, and the occasional Netflix session in bed. One morning, I noticed the password had changed. I asked her about it casually, and she laughed it off. IT said we should rotate them more often, she said, already brushing her teeth. But she didn't give me the new one. Later, she told me it was a temporary thing. I'll text it to you, she said. She never did. Her phone habits had shifted, too. I hadn't realized it at the time. The change was slow, almost imperceptible. But suddenly her phone was always with her. Bathroom, shower, even short walks to the mailbox. It used to sit on the nightstand like mine. Now it never left her side. It vibrated constantly, but she never read texts in front of me. She started angling the screen away when I sat beside her. Then came the money. We had a joint account we used for household expenses. Nothing extravagant, just a shared pot for groceries, bills, and date nights. One morning, I was reviewing our statements, something I did once a month out of habit, when I noticed a transfer. $5,000 moved to a personal savings account. Hers. I asked her about it. "Oh," she said, not missing a beat. "I'm thinking of doing a certificate course this fall. UX strategy. It's pricey, but the certification could help me move up." I nodded. That made sense. But the amount? It was more than she needed. And when I asked which program she was considering, she deflected. "Still weighing my options," she said, and kissed me on the cheek before I could ask anything else. Even her perfume had changed. She used to wear something light, lavender and jasmine, subtle and familiar. Lately it was sharper, muskier, the kind of scent that lingered long after she left the room. One night, I caught a faint trace of it on one of her scarves, mixed with something else. Not mine, not hers either. Another memory. I walked into the living room one evening and found her laughing on the phone. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, head tilted back, her face glowing in the way it used to when we first started dating. The second she saw me, her expression changed. She ended the call quickly. "Just Steph," she said. "From work." But when I asked if Steph was still planning that team retreat she'd mentioned, Amelia looked confused. "What retreat?" she said. Later that night, I passed by the living room and saw her phone light up. She picked it up, stared at the screen, and then, without a word, deleted the entire chat thread. I saw the gesture. I didn't say anything. I started blaming myself. Maybe I'd become too predictable, too complacent. I worked long hours, sure, but so did she. Maybe I hadn't noticed her changes because I wasn't paying enough attention. Maybe she had drifted away from me, and I hadn't even noticed. That thought was a knife I didn't know how to pull out. I tried to push the doubts down, to focus on work, on logic. I told myself I was overreacting, that every couple goes through rough patches, that Amelia loved me, that we were just stressed. From work, from life, from being together too long without a vacation. But the thoughts wouldn't stop. They followed me through the day, into the night, through meetings and grocery runs and mindless chores. I found myself checking her calendar app when she left her iPad open. I started glancing at the passenger seat of her car when I passed it in the driveway, looking for, I don't know, evidence? A forgotten note? An unfamiliar receipt? One night, I walked past our bathroom and heard her talking on the phone in hushed tones. The door was closed. I stood there for a full minute, listening to her laugh, soft, breathy, and then say, "I'll see you soon." The call ended, and the water started running. She stayed in the shower for 20 minutes. I never asked her who it was. That was the worst part, the silence I kept feeding. I didn't want to be the guy who asked too many questions. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband. So I swallowed it all. The cologne, the passwords, the late nights, the silence, until it all became too much to carry. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had an early client call scheduled, but it got rescheduled last minute. I came home around 4 in the afternoon, earlier than usual. The sky was still overcast from the morning storm, and our street had that post-rain hush to it. as if the world was trying to reset itself. I parked at the curb and sat in my car for a while, listening to the engine click as it cooled. That's when I saw the SUV. Black, shiny, definitely not from our neighborhood. It was parked right in front of our building, angled like the driver had pulled up in a hurry. It wasn't Amelia's. Her blue hybrid was in its usual spot under the carport. I stared at the SUV for a few seconds. My stomach tightened. Part of me knew. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand tight around the railing. I didn't know what I was going to find, but something in me had stopped hoping for the best. There's a stillness that settles in when dread becomes certainty. It's like stepping off a ledge and realizing gravity has already made up its mind. As I reached the top landing, I heard it, laughter. Muted at first, but unmistakable. A man's voice. Hers too. Our apartment door was slightly ajar. I didn't rush in. I didn't knock. Instead, I pulled out my phone and turned on the camera. I held my breath and gently pushed the door open wider, just enough to see. The hallway opened into our kitchen, and there they were. Amelia was pouring wine into 2 glasses, smiling as she leaned into a man who looked like he belonged in a glossy magazine ad. Sharp haircut, fitted blazer, the kind of man who knew how to occupy space. And then she kissed him. It wasn't a peck. It wasn't a greeting. It was a kiss that said this had been going on for a while. My thumb tapped the record button. The camera caught everything. The clinking of glasses, their laughter, Amelia's hand resting lightly on his chest. They toasted to something I didn't catch. I wanted to look away. I wanted to storm in and scream and demand answers. But I didn't. I watched. I filmed. And when the video was done, I turned around and left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't call her name. I just walked down the stairs, one step at a time, like a man carrying the last piece of evidence in a trial that was already over. I drove aimlessly for a while before pulling into a cheap motel off the highway. The clerk didn't ask questions when I paid in cash. Room 108 smelled like bleach and cigarette smoke. I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone screen, replaying the video until the battery hit red. I watched it again and again, not because I needed to confirm anything, but because some part of me still wanted to believe it wasn't real. But it was. She was kissing someone else in the kitchen where we used to cook together on lazy Sundays. Laughing with another man in the home I helped build. Drinking from the glasses we received as a wedding gift. I slept maybe an hour that night, if you can call that sleep. It was more like closing my eyes between jolts of nausea. The next morning, I woke up with a migraine and a clarity I didn't expect. I needed proof. All of it. Not just a single video or a bottle of cologne. I needed dates, names, paper trails. Because if this was the beginning of the end, I wasn't going to let her write the story alone. By 9 a.m., I had an appointment with a lawyer, a soft-spoken woman named Dana who didn't blink when I said, infidelity. She handed me a checklist, recommended a private investigator, and told me to keep documenting. Do not confront her yet, she said. You need leverage first. Leverage. That's what our marriage had become. Not love. Not forgiveness. Strategy. I left Dana's office and called the PI she recommended. A man named Vincent who sounded like he'd seen more betrayal than a therapist in a soap opera. We met that afternoon in a diner that smelled like old coffee and fried eggs. I slid my phone across the table and let him watch the video. He said nothing, just nodded and made a note in his pad. Give me 3 weeks, he said. I'll get you everything you need. Get me the truth, I said. Not just what I want to hear. He gave me a thin smile. The truth's usually worse. That night I went home. I timed it so I'd arrive after dark. The SUV was gone. The apartment was clean. Amelia was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't just erased our life. She looked up, surprised, and smiled. Hey, she said, like nothing had happened. I didn't know you were coming home early. I smiled back. Neither did I. She told me about her day. Said she ordered Thai but saved me some. Asked if I wanted to watch a movie. I nodded, said I was tired, and went to bed early. I lay there staring at the ceiling, her breathing soft beside me, and thought, This is what betrayal looks like. It's not always loud. It's not always screaming or slam doors. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it kisses you goodnight and asks if you want leftovers. In the weeks that followed, I learned the art of pretending. Each morning, I got up, kissed her on the forehead, and made coffee like nothing had changed. I nodded at her stories about work, smiled when she mentioned plans for the weekend, played the role of the loving husband while my world lay in pieces. But behind that mask, I was documenting everything. Vincent, the private investigator, worked faster than I expected. His first update came within 4 days. A slim envelope dropped discreetly into my mailbox, marked with just my name. Inside were photos, timestamps, even restaurant receipts. Amelia and the man, Justin, were easy to track. They weren't careful. Or maybe they thought I was too dull, too trusting, too occupied with wireframes and prototypes to notice. They met regularly. Hotel lounges. Mid-afternoon cafe runs. One Thursday lunch stretched 4 hours. One photo showed them checking into a boutique hotel downtown. Another, a cozy wine bar we had once loved, where she now leaned across a table and laughed into her wineglass while Justin reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Vincent included a transcript of a short exchange he'd overheard. Amelia, he barely talks anymore. It's like we're roommates who share a Netflix account. Justin, you deserve more than that. You know that, right? Amelia, I didn't marry for safety. I married because he used to see me. I don't know when that stopped. I read those lines over and over. I used to see her. That's what she said. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Something colder had taken its place. Not quite numbness, but something dangerously close to resolve. This wasn't a rescue mission. This wasn't about salvaging what we had. It was a chess game now, and I wasn't going to be the pawn. Amelia made a mistake. She left her tablet at home one morning, an old iPad that usually gathered dust on the nightstand. She probably thought it was clean, but it was synced with her phone and I knew the passcode. For digits. Our wedding anniversary. She hadn't changed it. I tapped in, opened the messaging app, and found everything. Messages from Justin. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Photos, flirtations, even voice memos. Plans to sneak away to Santa Fe. A draft of a heartfelt letter she said she couldn't wait to send. About starting a new chapter, a new life. She had a separate banking app installed. I didn't even know she had another account. In it were 2 months' worth of deposits and transfers. Clean, quiet, almost clever. And then I found something that stopped me cold. A draft email to a real estate agent. Listings for condos in a neighborhood Amelia had once dismissed as too new money. She was planning to buy. Without telling me. Without asking. She was building a parallel life. One foot in our home, the other on the gas pedal, ready to drive away. And yet, in the middle of it all, one message from her to Justin stood out. My husband stopped paying attention a long time ago. Now I'm just getting ahead of what's inevitable. I closed the tablet and sat on the edge of the bed. It was noon. The sun filtered in through the blinds, slicing the room into light and shadow. She didn't know I was reading everything, that I was building a dossier of her betrayal. Every message she deleted from her phone, still there on the cloud. Every whisper into Justin's ear, now printed and dated. 2 weeks later, I flew to Houston for a tech expo. My company had secured a major partnership, the kind that required FaceTime, handshakes, and smiles over cocktails. Amelia's firm was attending too. I didn't tell her I was going. I just packed a bag and boarded a plane. On the second day of the conference, I spotted her. She was standing by a booth, laughing with a group of her coworkers. Justin wasn't there, at least not yet. I approached with calm, even steps. She noticed me mid-laugh. Her expression didn't falter. Not much. A flicker. That was all. She walked toward me. Edward? She said, as if we were old acquaintances. Didn't know you'd be here. Last minute, I said. She gestured to the people around her. Everyone, this is my ex Edward. I blinked. Ex. She didn't correct herself. The others gave polite nods. eyes flicking between us like we were a soap opera rerun they couldn't turn off. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. A thin, black dossier with a clear cover. I laid it flat on the nearest table and opened it. Photos, texts, bank statements, her draft email to the realtor, her message about how I'd stopped paying attention. No one said a word. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look back. I just turned and walked away. That night, she came home to find the locks changed. No note, no message. Just the echo of her own key scraping uselessly against a mechanism that no longer recognized her. She knocked, then banged, then called. I didn't answer. She paced the porch in her heels for 20 minutes before she finally noticed the boxes in the garage, neatly labeled, her name scrawled in Sharpie. Her clothes. Her files. The espresso machine she insisted we buy even though she hated making coffee at home. Everything packed and waiting. She tried the door again. Then her voice came through, muffled but sharp. "Edward, are you serious right now? What the hell is this?" I was upstairs. Lights off. Phone off. I listened. 10 minutes later, her car pulled out of the driveway. And that's when the real unraveling began. The first crack was professional. Amelia's firm, a marketing consultancy that bragged about its values-first leadership, had just finalized a partnership with the same tech client I was consulting for. When I dropped the dossier on that conference table, I wasn't just handing over personal pain. I was implicating her in a violation of her firm's non-fraternization policy. Justin was a client. She was his account manager. The rumor mill didn't wait long. By Monday morning, I had 2 voicemails. One from a mutual acquaintance at her firm. One from Justin. He sounded shaken. "Hey, Edward. Listen. I didn't know she was married. She told me you two were separated. I wouldn't have if I'd known. Look, man, I don't want trouble. I'm happy to clarify that if it comes up legally. I'm sorry. It was almost laughable. The guy who helped tear apart my marriage, calling to protect himself." I forwarded his message to my lawyer. Vincent, the PI, had already drafted his affidavit. Amelia, meanwhile, was unraveling in real time. She sent emails. Lots of them. At first calm, rational. Then pleading. Then angry. "You had no right to interfere in my career. This was between us, not the entire industry. You ambushed me. You humiliated me. I want to talk." I didn't respond. When she showed up at my office, security was already briefed. They turned her away without a scene. When she sent a bouquet to the front desk with a note, "Please. Just 5 minutes." I gave the flowers to the receptionist and had the note shredded. Then came the legal filings. My lawyer filed for divorce, citing adultery and financial concealment. Thanks to the documentation Vincent collected, we were able to freeze our shared assets. The condo she had her eye on? She couldn't touch the funds. The joint investments she used to monitor with a color-coded spreadsheet? Locked down. I offered a clean split, but it came with conditions. No alimony. No claims on my business equity. No challenge to the distribution. Her lawyer tried to push back. Then he saw the evidence. The moment that hurt the most, the one I didn't expect, came during our first deposition. We sat across from each other at a polished wood table. She looked smaller. Not physically, but emotionally. Her eyes darted. Her hands wouldn't stay still. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. She wouldn't meet my gaze until the end. When the attorneys called a break, she leaned across the table and whispered, "You really meant it. You're really done." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Outside the deposition, her professional life continued to implode. Her firm launched an internal review. Justin, covering his own skin, submitted a signed statement confirming the affair and distancing himself from her entirely. Their Santa Fe plans? Dead. The startup apartment? Gone. I heard she was put on indefinite leave pending investigation. Meanwhile, I moved forward. I kept things simple. Clean. Cold. No outbursts. No drama. Just legal motions, dotted lines, and envelopes. Her last attempt came through a mutual friend. A dinner invitation just to talk. She wanted to explain. Not to reconcile, she said, just to clear the air. I declined. There was nothing left to say. After the dust settled and the papers were signed, I left Austin. I didn't tell many people. I packed what I needed, sold what I didn't, and drove west until the road met the ocean. San Diego greeted me with a kind of softness I hadn't felt in years, warm salt air, muted sunsets, and the kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything from you. I rented a small apartment near Ocean Beach. Nothing fancy. A one-bedroom with scuffed hardwood and a leaky faucet, but it was mine. Every choice inside, the couch, the plants, even the chipped mugs, belonged to me and no one else. My days took on a new rhythm. Mornings at a nearby cafe, working remotely for a startup that needed UX help. Afternoons walking by the shore. No meetings I didn't want, no polite small talk I had to fake. Just space. Just breath. That's where I met Claire. She was standing at the tide pools one evening, squinting into a notebook and muttering about shrimp behavior. She was a marine biologist working on a local research grant, and she laughed like someone who didn't need permission to be herself. We didn't fall into anything fast. No whirlwind. Just slow, steady curiosity. Coffee became walks. Walks became conversations. And somewhere in that quiet space, I started to feel like a person again. Claire never asked about Amelia. Not directly. She let me show up with whatever version of myself I had on a given day, and she didn't expect a full explanation. That was the gift, no judgment, no agenda. Just presence. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't playing a role. I didn't have to prove I was okay. I just was. One warm July evening, I was sitting on the balcony with Claire. The ocean hummed below us, and we watched the sun bleed slowly into the Pacific. She handed me a glass of wine, and we toasted without words. My phone buzzed. It was an email forwarded from my lawyer. Subject line, for Edward. The sender was Amelia. I stared at it for a minute. Claire noticed but didn't press. She simply nodded and turned back to the sea. I opened it. It was long. A year's worth of thoughts in a single digital breath. She said she'd been in therapy. That she'd come to understand her own patterns. That she wasn't asking for anything, not forgiveness, not conversation, just that I hear her. She wrote, "You didn't deserve what I did. I know that now. And even if you never respond, I hope someday you can let go of the hurt I caused." I read the whole thing. Carefully. Then again, slower. And when I finished, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not relief. Just a quiet, echoing stillness. I deleted the email. Not out of malice, just because it didn't belong in the life I was living now. I turned off my phone, set it aside, and looked at Claire. She smiled, her eyes soft in the twilight. In that moment, I realized something. What had once felt like an ending sharp, brutal, unfixable was actually the beginning of something better. Something honest. Something mine. And I didn't need closure. I had peace.